going guys, John here. This is the Basic Expert. I want to welcome you to my channel. Today we're going to continue our discussion on basic fantasy role-playing game. And we're going to talk about Treasure today. And before we get into that, I want to talk about my game, Cowpunchers, real quick. It is available as a print-on-demand from Lulu. PDF is available on DriveThruRPG if you're interested in supporting me that way. I also have a lot of other cool tools on my itch.io store. All links to all this will be in the video description. I also want to ask you, if you like what I do and want to support what I'm doing, consider supporting me on my Subscribestar page. At $1 a month, you get a dungeon map a week. $3 and up, you get an adventure. And these adventures are pretty cool. So let's see. Next month in June, if you're interested in that, is going to be a Traveler one-shot adventure that I've been using on my Traveler, Classic Traveler, West Marches style game that I'm doing. So if you're interested in that, quick little adventure, little scenario of hostage rescue on a Belter colony on a planetoid. So check that out. The adventure for May is about the Machine Sorcerer. You get a Roll20 compatible map. Let's see. Let's just go to it here, and I'll show it to you really quick. This one here, you get these compatible maps, these virtual tabletop compatible maps that I make myself. And these can be thrown into Roll20 or whatever virtual tabletop you're using. They're made at 70 pixels per square, and you get a PDF adventure that's like this. You get your monster stat blocks. I like to use the basic fantasy style hit point checkbox for things, so you get lots of different cool stuff when you support my channel. At least I hope you think it's cool. But on to the content for today. And again, sorry this video is late too. I was busy weekend. So one thing that basic fantasy is not clear on, and I want to touch on it before we talk about Treasure, is the idea of gold equaling experience points. In the basic fantasy rulebook, it kind of specifies that you're only getting experience points from monsters, which is going to be very slow, very kind of drudgery. And that's not really the old school way. And basic fantasy is using a lot of the old school level thresholds as far as experience points are concerned. And so I would encourage dungeon masters to use gold as XP, 1 gold piece equaling 1 XP. Now, Professor Dungeoncraft and Matthew Colville have both made videos talking about how to motivate your players, and I feel like both of them, I'm sure they played lots of old school games. I know Professor Dungeoncraft's favorite edition of D&D is Moldvay Basic, which is a fantastic edition, fantastic iteration of the game in my opinion. But in those old school games, they talk about gold equaling experience points, and so that's what I would use in this. They kind of throws a little bit of shade at this methodology, saying that, at least the Professor Dungeoncraft does, if I remember correctly, saying that it motivates murder hobos, and I disagree. But he gives the example saying that, you know, back in the day, if a character was a few experience points short of leveling up, they might go and murder some villagers or murder some peasants in game, steal their gold and silver until they have enough to level up. And that this is somehow a flaw in gold equaling XP, and I kind of disagree with this sentiment. Sure, that's a possibility of a player deciding that they want to do that, but I feel like as a DM, if I don't have mercenaries come after, like bounty hunters come after that player, if I don't have guards, city guards, investigators, someone within that world who's responsible for carrying out justice to come after those players, and or angry mobs of villagers, that I'm doing something wrong as a game master. I'm not doing justice to the world the players are adventuring in. So I don't really see that quote argument as something that throws a wrench in gold equaling XP or makes it an inferior system, or even as a flaw. That's a flaw of the DM not doing their job as a DM. So let's get into it. This is on page 42, where it's not very clear. It just shows you, again, we went over this in another video when we went over this section, but it doesn't really tell you explicitly that 1 gold piece equals 1 XP. But that's what it needs to be. If you're looking for a good XP equal to gold system, I would suggest White Box Adventure Game, medieval fantasy adventure game. Really does a really good job of explaining how you can use gold as XP. It's based on OD&D, so that's what the White Box is referencing to there. It's pretty solid, so I would highly suggest checking that out if you're looking for a detailed. If you're not able to get your hands on actual older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, like the Rule Cyclopedia First Edition or OD&D, if you're not able to get your hands on those kinds of things, which PDFs and print-on-demands of that stuff is available, but if you're not able to get that, or you don't want to give WotC money, which I totally understand, I would suggest looking at White Box Medieval Fantasy Adventure Game, and there's some good rules in there for character advancements using gold as XP. But let's get down to treasure. So we went through monsters in our last video. Let's get down to treasure within Dungeons and Dragons, or within basic fantasy, which in my opinion is more real Dungeons and Dragons than this. If we could get to the end here. We're almost there. As you can see, you get a lot of monsters, and the crazy thing is too, and I mentioned this in the other videos, they have 2 other monster manuals for this game that makes the number of creatures you can throw at your players. You'll have more than enough crazy monsters to give your players a challenge with than you would think for a free game. So, Part 7, page 133 of the PDF, page 129 in the physical book, if you're following along with me there. Let's talk about treasure. So, some adventurers choose adventure to battle evil, while others seek to attain glory or power, but others go in search of treasure, gold, jewels, and magical items. Below is the information the game masters will need to satisfy the greedy. Not just the greedy, but again, if you're like me and using gold as XP, it's a motivator for getting your player characters to get out there and adventure and delve into those dungeons. And you have, following that, I mean, you can read all this if you want. It's just some decent advice on how to use these treasure generators. You have these, and these are layer treasures, individual treasures, unguarded treasures, and then you have gems, jewelry. And then you have magic item generation here on page 132, potions, lots of really cool, useful stuff, and then explanations of what these magical items can do. And if you look on these monsters here, if you go to treasure type none, let's try and find one where there's treasure type S, so this sprite here. If the player characters are able to defeat this, we go to treasure type S, and this is where we will find S is in these personal individual treasures. So this shows, like, for that sprite, they have no chance of having any gold, silver, platinum, electrum, anything, or gold, silver, electrum, or copper on them. They will have 1d6, sorry, looking at the wrong one. They'll have 2d4 pieces of gold on the sprites, nothing else. But let's say that a monster has U. Let's say a monster had treasure type U here. So there's a 50% chance of them having 1d20 copper pieces on them, 50% chance of having 1d20 silver. They're not going to have any electrum, 25% chance of 1d20 gold pieces, not going to have any platinum, and a 5% chance of having 1d4 pieces of jewelry, of gems, and 5% chance of having 1d4 pieces of jewelry, and a 2% chance of having any one magic item on them. And the way you're going to do this is you're going to roll a percentage dice, your D100, D percentile dice, and you want to roll under this roll. So if I am doing it for an individual treasure for a creature that is tagged with U here, I'm going to roll my D100, and if I roll a 30%, let's say I roll 30, Well, now I roll 1d20 to see how many copper. Let's say I do it again and like, oh, I roll a 25. Perfect. The players are going to get even more treasure now. I'm going to roll 1d20 silver for that monster. So on and so forth. Then you have, again, the layered treasures here. And these layered treasures, you're going to do the same thing. So let's say it's treasure type A. You're going to roll, there's a 50% chance they're going to have 5d6 of 100 pieces. So you're going to, whatever you roll here, 5d6. Let's say you roll 10. 10 times 100 is 1,000. There's going to be 1,000 copper pieces in this layer. You're going to roll your percentile dice. Try and roll under 60%. If you're successful, you're going to roll your 5d6 and multiply it by 100, and that's how many silver pieces are going to be inside the layer. So on and so forth. And you can see for like layers and how they kind of rank up here. It looks, A is obviously the best. This is like probably a dragon's hoard here, where the players really did something to earn this. They fought a lich, they fought a dragon, something like that in order to get that. In fact, let's look at dragons to see. Well, treasure type H for the black dragon. Let's see, HH. Let's see, H, they're all H. I don't know who would have an A treasure. There's D. None. Oh, well, I'm sure there's some monster in here that has treasure type A. Let's say D. One of those dragons was D. Let's look at D. D is still pretty good. 30% chance of having 46 times 100 copper pieces. 45% chance of having 66 times 100 silver pieces. Not going to have any electrum. 90% chance of having 5d8 times 100 gold pieces. Not going to have any platinum. 30% chance of gems, 30% chance of jewelry, 20% chance for magic item, and 1 to 2 magic items and a potion. So let's say you rolled all this, you're trying to figure it out, you get to this, like let's say they have jewelry, you're going to roll a D percentile dice, which will be here. You're going to have ornamental, fancy, semi-precious, fancy, precious, gem, and then jewels here. And it's missing one there. I don't think my book looks like that. I wonder if that's a typo. This tells you the value here. You're going to roll 2d6 because sometimes you might, let's say you roll a precious gem worth 500. And you're like, gonna roll on this, and let's say you roll a 3. So it's actually a precious gem, but the value of it is going to be halved. So it's actually, instead of 500, it's going to be 250. And then you can roll for the gem type here. Roll a D100. Let's say you roll an amethyst. So it's going to be an amethyst worth that's semi-precious, but it's worth half of the value listed here. So 250. So that's how I use these treasure charts. And then for jewelry here, you kind of roll it over here as well. So standard items for jewelry are 2d8 times 10 GP value. So you're going to roll for a D100 to see what you get. Let's say you roll for a scepter. Here, you roll 96, you're getting a scepter. You're going to roll 2d8 and multiply that value by 100, and that's going to be the value that scepter is going to be worth. Super easy. You got magic item generation here, and there's a further supplement that gives you more rules for sentient weapons, which I might cover later at a later date. But you're going to roll a D percentile dice. You can choose, so if it says any on the treasure chart, you're going to use this column. If it's weapon or armor only, you're going to use this one here, because that means you're not going to be finding potions, scrolls, rings, wands, staffs, or rods and miscellaneous magic items. You're only going to be finding weapons and armor with this range here. And then if there's anything other than weapon, you're going to use this one. And again, the charts here are going to tell you, like for instance here, F, 1d4 except weapons. So you're going to have a 35% chance. Let's say you roll a 33. I'm going to come down here, and you're going to do this column here for figuring out if you are what the players find. For you have percentile dice for rolling for magic weapons here, like what kind of weapon it's going to be, what its magical bonus is going to be, which is potentially cursed, as you can see here. You're going to roll to see if it has a special enemy, which is right here. So let's say you roll in this range here, for special enemy. Let's say you get a melee weapon here. It's a +1, +2 for special enemy. You're gonna roll, and let's say you get lucky, and its special enemy is dragons. You rolled a 1 on a d6, so that means that against dragons, this magic weapon is a +2, and against everything else, a +1. You're gonna roll to see if it has any special abilities, which is right here. So this tells you everything you need to know, very clear cut, how to do it, and you also have the same kind of charts for magic armor as well. Potion generation, you have the same kind of thing here, and essentially what a lot of these potions are going to do is going to grant you the ability to sometimes perform a spell. That's what oftentimes scrolls do as well. Magic rings here as well. So you have plenty of charts here, and I prefer this method of magic item generation. I haven't looked. I should probably have grabbed it off my bookshelf before I started doing this, but I hadn't looked at 5th edition's Dungeon Master Guide, which with its magic item generation. Got this light right in my face from my blinds. It's horrible. I remember it just being kind of frustrating and trying to make magic items. So I really appreciate that this is here. And then you get a section here kind of explaining how magic items are used. To use a magic item, it must be activated, although sometimes activation simply means putting a ring on your finger. Sometimes, once donned, function constantly. Other times, it might be a command word, as it says here. And it says, like, assume that there could be a command word if it's not something like a ring where it just works. This is very different than and more simple than what 5th edition does, where you need attunement and all these other sorts of things, and you can only be attuned to so many weapons. You do have rules for, I believe, somewhere in here, for rings. Players can only wear a certain amount of rings, and I forget where it's at in here. A ring, let's see. You can only no more than 1 ring per hand. That has spell-like power, often a constant effect that affects the wearer. So they can't wear more than 1 ring at a time. So there's you got to suspend some disbelief here, but that's there for balancing reasons. And I guess you could explain it away where if you put more than 1 magic item on a hand, that those rings will interact with each other, and maybe you could rule that some bad things happen, or you can disregard the rule if you want to and want really powerful players and just have them run around like a bunch of bling on their hands. That works too. But you have for spell level, for when you're trying to, if they find a spell scroll, which is very useful for magic users in order to helps them to learn more spells to add them to their spell book. Roll a D percentile dice, and you can figure out what level spell is going to be on that scroll. So treasure is very important, very useful. Treasure and magic items in particular, for instance, are how a lot of players are going to advance their character in a lot of ways. Unlike 5th edition, your ability scores are not going to change. You can possibly find magic items that will increase an ability score that higher than what it already has, or curse it to go lower. But you're not going to be getting to level 3 and like, oh, I get some ability points that I can apply, ability score points that I can apply to my scores. You're not going to be getting scores generally, naturally, that are above 18 in these older school style games and modes of play. So magic items, and I mean, like, as characters level, their attack bonuses are going up, their hit points are going up, but ability scores are staying the same. And some of the power that comes from for players that allows them to deal with bigger and greater threats in these old school games comes from finding magic items that have special abilities. So, I think for this video, that's where I'm going to end it. A little shorter video this week, but I don't want to clog this up with too much, because after this, after magic items, we get into the game master information, wandering random encounters, and NPC followers, and we're going to be getting with what game master advice it has over here, optional rules, and I think we get into magical research and domain play a little bit. It goes into it as well as to what characters get when they reach named level. So that there's a lot here, so I think we're going to cover this in another video, because it's just too much for this video, and I don't want this one to be super long. I want everything to be digestible bites as much as possible here. But tell me what you think. Do you use these magical and treasure tables? I think that they're absolutely fantastic and useful. It's very this treasure table here, if I could scroll to it. These treasure tables are very similar to the treasure tables that are in the Rules Cyclopedia, which is why I like them. And you could even just use the Rules Cyclopedia treasure tables if you wanted to, if you prefer those, but they're pretty much the same thing. It's very similar. So, do you use these kinds of tables, or do you use something else? So, sound off in the comments. Let me know. Until the next video, talk to you guys later, or if you're going to tune in tonight for my live stream, that'd be awesome. Until then, talk to you guys later. Peace out.